Welcome to our continuing series, Questions and Answers for a World in Crisis. The Psychic Being, Part 4. Sri Aurobindo and Mother have written so extensively on the psychic being in answers to questions raised by disciples that we have created a 10-part series taken from their writings. But there is still much more that we encourage you to delve deeper. You can search our website, motherandsriaurobindo.in, and find all they have written. From Sri Aurobindo. These things, love, compassion, kindness, bhakti, ananda, are the nature of the psychic being. Because the psychic being is formed from the divine consciousness. It is the divine part within you. The psychic being is not the fulfiller of desires. It is the spark of the divine in all things manifested here that grows into the psychic being and supports the evolution. It is that which survives the dissolution of the vital and physical sheaths and returns to birth again. There is individuality in the psychic being, but not egoism. Egoism goes when the individual unites himself with the divine, or is entirely surrendered to the divine. It is the psychic inmost being that replaces the ego. It is through love and surrender to the divine that the psychic being becomes strong and manifest so that it can replace the ego. By liberated psychic being, I mean that it is no longer obliged to express itself under the conditions of the obscure and ignorant instruments from behind a veil, but is able to come forward, control, and change the action of mind and life and body. When the soul or spark of the divine fire begins to develop a psychic individuality, that psychic individuality is called the psychic being. The psychic fire is the fire of aspiration, purification, and tapasya, which comes from the psychic being. It is not the psychic being, but a power of the psychic being. The psychic being is a purusha, not a flame. The psychic fire is not the being, it is something proper to it. On the contrary, when the psychic being gets in front and becomes master, there comes in a fundamentally smooth action, and although there are difficulties, and undulations of movement, these are no longer of an abrupt or dramatic character. The psychic being is always there, but is not felt because it is covered up by the mind and vital. When it is no longer covered up, it is then said to be awake. When it is awake, it begins to take hold of the rest of the being, to influence it and change it, so that all may become the true expression of the inner soul. It is this change that is called the inner conversion. There can be no conversion without the awakening of the psychic being. It is your psychic being which came in front, probably, or else it is the true vital being in you which was able to come in front because you took the psychic attitude. When the psychic being comes in front, there is an automatic perception of the true and untrue, the divine and the undivine, the spiritual right and wrong of things. And the false vital and mental movements and attacks are immediately exposed and fall away and can do nothing. Gradually, the vital and physical, as well as the mind, get full of this psychic light and truth and sound feeling and purity, and such violent attacks as you have are impossible. When the psychic being awakens, you grow conscious of your own soul. You know yourself. And you no longer commit the mistake of identifying yourself with the mental or with the vital being. You do not mistake them for the soul. Secondly, when awakened, the psychic being gives true bhakti for God or for the Guru. That bhakti is quite different from mental or vital bhakti. The psychic being knows how to obey the truth in the right way. It gives itself up truly to God or to the Guru. And because it can give itself up truly, therefore it can also receive truly. Thirdly, when the psychic being comes to the surface, it feels sad when the mental or the vital being is making a fool of itself. That sadness is purity offended. When the mind is playing its own game, or when the vital being is carried away by its own impulses, it is the psychic being which says, I don't want these things. What am I here for, after all? I am here for the truth. I am not here for these things. If the psychic being is strong, it makes itself felt on the mental or the vital being and forces them, compels them to change. But if it is weak, the other parts take advantage of it and use the psychic sadness to their own advantage. In some cases, the psychic being comes up to the surface and upsets the mental or the vital being and throws everything into disorder. But if the mind or the vital being is stronger than the psychic, then it casts only an occasional influence and gradually retires behind. All its cry is in the wilderness, and the mental or vital being goes on in its own round. Lastly, the psychic being refuses to be deceived by appearances. It is not carried away by falsehood. It refuses to be depressed by falsehood, nor does it exaggerate the truth. For example, even if everything around says there is no God, the psychic being refuses to believe in it. It says, I know, and I know because I feel. And because it knows the thing behind, it is not deceived by appearances. It immediately feels the force. Also, when the psychic being is awakened, it throws out all the dross from the emotional being and makes it free from sentimentalism or the lower play of emotionalism.